that's about mothers and also fathers who now are less likely to take paternity leave. So there's lots of statistics coming through saying that actually COVID in terms of diversity and inclusion was not an inventor, it was a time machine, and with some things they put things forward, but with some things like diversity and inclusion actually had also negative effect. So one thing that we wanted to discuss today is, what in practice we can do to make sure that diversity and inclusion remains on the agenda of our organizations. And I mean it in a very wide sense of this world. So it's not just about gender, it's not just about race, it's not just about disabilities, it's about all of it. Yes, so I wonder if you could share what you're currently doing yourselves, as people who are in very progressive organizations, to make sure that diversity and inclusion remains important and we don't lose the sight of it in the middle of hard work and national anxiety as well and everything. So if I could start with you, Emma, as you are on my right on the screen.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, we've really embedded it in everything we're doing. So what was really interesting is we relaunched our values at the start of the year, and one of our values is about welcoming everyone, and that applies to our people, our volunteers, and the people who visit. And we'd done that anyway, so we'd redeveloped our values in conjunction with staff. So lots of people had given input into what they should look like to make sure they were relevant for everybody.
And they've changed a lot.
No, they've refocused and they've really worked to make it more relevant because I think there were some people who felt like it just didn't apply to their jobs. So, for example, if you work in IT, you can feel a little bit removed from the core of what the organisation is about. So really trying to bring it to life in terms of how does this look for everybody doing their job, and there's a lot around what does it look like in practice, but also what does it not look like? So how would you be doing things that aren't displaying the values? And I think we've used that then as a handrail through this whole situation. So it's been talked about in every leaders briefing through the whole of everything we've been dealing with in terms of crisis management and our restructuring and everything. It's been something that's been referred to in every single briefing that's happened. And then we've done a lot of training for anybody involved in anything around our restructuring, so that that's all embedded then in the decisions that are taken around selection of people for roles. So all of the people involved in that process have had to do an inclusive recruitment training session. And then there's been lots of sessions run for managers who are involved in any part of the process, again, where all of those things have been talked about a lot. So I think diversity and inclusion have come out as things that have to be checked. And then we've had moderation done on all of the selection processes by key people in our people team, checking that there's been no discrimination and checking that inclusion has been considered, so that we're not disadvantaging anybody through that process. So I think it's just interesting that it's become just how we're talking about everything we're doing. And I think the other thing I've seen where it's playing out is then thinking about staff well-being. We've all been sprinting for this year. We've all been going at such a pace in terms of crisis management and having to respond. We've been talking a lot about the fact that people can't keep that up. We have to start resetting into a new way of working. And with all of that, I think the fact that that's all just coming together in everything we're doing, thinking about how do you consider well-being, but do it with that lens of what does this mean for an individual? Because it all comes down to individuals, doesn't it? Anything I think that's around people feeling part of an organisation and feeling valued, you have to think about them and their specific circumstances and not assume. And I think there's lots of really great open conversations going on about what works and what doesn't for individuals. So yeah, really, I've been incredibly proud actually of working in the organisation, but particularly it's been so wonderful to see our very senior leaders showing all of that and how they've approached things, and then really expecting that and instilling that then through leadership. And I think it's then just filtering through because people are leading by example.
Now I have a question actually. I wonder if in anyone's organization have the performance management criteria changed? or have the performance reviews remained the same? Because there's a lot about, especially people who are in more senior positions, saying that the performance objectives have not changed, and obviously the working environment is much more challenging and difficult. So, and that could lead to, obviously lots of issues around mental health. So within, your organizations, has performance reviews criteria changed or were adjusted to the current situation?
We've completely suspended it for this year.
You've suspended it, Molly?
So the decision we took was that this year was not a normal year, and that people have had to react to so many different things. So what we're doing instead this year is we're doing recognition sessions at end of year to stop and actually discuss with people the things they have achieved, because we've got so many people who've gone so far above and beyond all year round. We also gave people an extra week off. An extra week of leave, because again, for the people who've worked all the way through, a lot of them have just not stopped and they've done so much extra. So we're going to reinstate everything from the new year with our new plan, which is all about renewal. So how do we recover from what's happened and start to reset back toward our strategy? So next year will be very much about realigning us to that.
Yeah, thank you. What about that organization, Molly? What's happening within DHL?
Yeah, so we've actually been on a bit of a journey before this year landed. So things like how we do our end of year evaluations, we base that now on 6 things. So being results orientated, leveraging strengths, providing purpose, having and creating trust, focusing on clear priorities, and being positive about challenges, uncertainty and change. Really snappy. I had to bring that up because I couldn't remember it. But that's moved on in terms of we don't evaluate people based on you did that task. It's all about those ways that people are approaching things. Are they getting the best out of themselves, the best out of other people? Are they building those good relationships? And that all came in a couple of years ago, but I think it's sort of improved this year, because actually we're going through the process at the moment. So we had to do our self-evaluations last month. This month it's manager evaluations. Next month will be the matching of the two and seeing how closely they align, which is always fun. But that kind of thing, you don't see whether it's working till you see it in a crunch situation. And I think this year, actually, as I'm going through and doing that for my team, I'm really liking the way that evaluates. It's not saying how much work did you get done, because this year has been what it is. People have been able to work in different ways. Some people have been trapped, literally, not where they're supposed to be for months on end. You can't possibly expect the same outputs. But what you can still expect is those behavioural things. And because it's all based on behaviours, that's something you can always choose, because that is in your gift. And even if you're going through a horrible time personally, you can still choose to respect other people. And they form, that ties into our respect and results. So we focus on those 2 key elements. And the results we sort of assume will sort of happen, because we've got good people. So if we focus on the respect, that helps drive the results. And this year that has been so evident. From the very start of lockdown, communication had been fantastic. We've had regular emails through saying this is what's happening. We've had town halls and things being broadcast. We've had regular sort of sessions where different levels of the organisation have been sharing information or calling for information or doing surveys. We've all felt very, very engaged. And actually, I think there have been some positives to support the D&I agenda that have come out of this. One of those is that because we're such a spread out organisation, particularly those that are based at a site, they may never see anyone else who works in IT. We've got so many sites. If you're a lone person on a site as the only IT person, it can be quite hard to physically get off that site, because you're the only one who can fix stuff and be there and be the person that people trust and know. So trying to get people off site to do an extended team meeting, really difficult. Trying to get someone off site to do any training, really difficult. But actually, with it all being online, firstly, they're working from home anyway. So the site have actually realised that they can support them remotely. Secondly, the people can be wherever they are in the country. If you're working in Liverpool, doesn't mean you can't join a corporate IT forum event, which normally would be held in London. So like that event last week, the mentoring event, there were so many fantastic young women from our organisation joined that call that I know would have really struggled to get off their sites. It was really interesting because the demographic was very different. Normally we get graduates who are quite flexible, and we get more senior people who look after their own diaries. The people somewhere sat in between get a little bit stuck. And actually there were loads of them on that call last week, and I was just so excited because these are people that I've never met, And I've been wandering around IT for sort of 9 years. I know almost nearly everybody, didn't know most of them, because they're the ones that get a little bit trapped on the sides. And so I think actually there's a lot of opportunity that's come from this. And when we come to hiring and things like that as well, we've always had to say high levels of travel. Well, at the moment, that isn't true. So actually somebody could go for a role where there's a high level of travel, but there isn't currently, and actually they can ease into that role and then see what level of travel suits them, longer term. So rather than certain roles being closed off to people who've got childcare responsibilities or looking after their parents, or they just happen to be the one that is more at home, whatever it may be, actually this is opening up things. And what I really like about the way that our leaders have approached the whole D&I perspective throughout this is they've actually upped the importance of it. They've said, bring that many people all the time, so that we'll almost put that bit to the side. Let's make sure the people we've got are included and belong. And so that's been the real focus, is inclusion and belonging. And that is now a conversation, a standard conversation, every single time our senior leadership meeting for IT meets. So they've got 2 topics that are always on the agenda: safety, because that's always the first thing on any agenda in our company, and now inclusion and diversity is the second. Those are the only 2 mandated topics. And I think that just shows how important everyone sees it as being. We've got a big resurgence globally going on. So there's a global board, there are country boards, and then coming out of those, there are subgroups. So I'm leading the IT subgroup in UK and I. We've got all the benefit of all those global people, and we're nicking all their good ideas, but we're also doing the things that work for us. And we've got a wide enough community that we can actually trial things. So we've got about 350 people in the UK. So we're big enough that we can trial things that, you can't necessarily trial on 500,000 people, but you can trial on us. It's a big enough group to make a difference, but also small enough. If we get it wrong, we can put our hands up and say, hey, we tried this, it hasn't worked. Forgive us, we're going to try something else. And we're now doing listening groups and focusing on creating safe spaces for people, which again...
Can you tell us more about listening groups? How do they work?
Yeah, so we're right at the start of the journey, but what we've done is we've set up, we had an initial trial group, and then we asked for some feedback, and based on that, we've set up a monthly, just an hour, for, at the moment, we've set this up for women, and we're looking to set this up for some of the other subgroups as well. So we're looking to set it up for LGBTQ+, for race, for disability, various other groups we've identified. But this first one we've set up for women. We're just saying this is women in IT, and it's a coffee chat, and that's it. There is no other structure around it. So the only thing we've all got in common is that we're all women working in IT. But the benefit of that is that we've had conversations that people have never been given the space to have before. So some of the lovely feedback from the first session was people saying, I didn't realise how important this was. I've never had an opportunity to have this discussion. Or people who've been working with a colleague for years never realised they'd been through a situation or felt a certain way. But because we had this safe space, there was no judgment, there was no desire to actually do anything with it. It was simply a space to talk. And so that's what we wanted to really emphasize, is that this isn't a situation to try and fix anything. This is just to talk and to share experience. Could be positive, could be negative, could be slightly sideways, things that you wouldn't necessarily think of as being a woman's issue. But actually one of the things that came out of that conversation was a lot of women didn't know what to wear to work. It might sound really silly, but for men in our organisation, it's really straightforward. They wear a suit. They wear a suit and they wear a really boring looking shirt, because that's what they all do. And if you do that, you fit in. And if you don't do that, you stand out. For women, we've got so many options. Nobody knew what the standard thing for women to wear was. And actually, it's something I'd never thought about. But when we started talking about it, so many women were saying, well, if I wear a dress, people look at me in this way. But if I wear, trousers and a t-shirt, they look at me that way. What is the standard? What's our equivalent? So we're now going to loop that into some secondary sessions, which we're also going to have once a month, which are, again, free for people to dial into, not dial into, jump in, jump out, whatever they want to do. And those are focused sessions. So where we've got a topic that we think, well, let's talk about this a bit more and actually figure out, is there something we can do about this, and be a little bit proactive and a bit challenging. Those are in separate sessions. So we're going to have one on clothing. We're going to have one for those who have children or are thinking about having children, or, for caring responsibilities, and have those things that they're doing that are not work, that are taking up time and effort and thought, and how does that maybe impact their career in a positive or a negative way. We're going to have another one where we're going to do what we're calling a silly questions session. So we're going to invite some men in our organisation to come and speak to some women from our organisation, and the numbers will be up to those individuals to say what feels comfortable. Could be a one-on-one discussion, could be 2-3 people, and that conversation will just be saying, so what is this then? You know, and it will be an opportunity for those men in our organisation to ask really silly questions of the women and say things, you know, well, I don't understand, why is it different for you? You know, why is it that women are constantly banging on about X, Y, or Z? I don't get it. And they won't have fear of judgment in that session. They can ask whatever silly questions they want to. The women can choose to answer or not to answer. And if those women are comfortable with it, and the men as well are comfortable with it, we will then take some excerpts from that, either in video or transcripts, and we'll share those and start to build a library, so that people who are interested enough to want to investigate but maybe don't feel confident jumping into a session like that, they can get the benefit of it too. As we look into
it's an interesting point about being, you know, things like that being voluntary and people choosing to attend rather than being taught to attend. It was there's a research done about bias training, and they said that one of the problems with this type of training is, although you know, companies, you know, want to clearly promote the right things and the right type of thinking, actually people's reaction very often is, as I'm told not to do that, I'm going to rebel against it. So actually it does not bring the results expected. And they said, if you allow people to choose, you know, to attend or choose, you know, what they want to do with it, the results actually in terms of making the change are longer staying and, you know, much better long term. So if Jamie, what, you know, would you be willing to share what's happening within your organizations? Are there any practical initiatives that you think it would be worth, you know, for others to also to know?
Yeah. So to others, my company has started to kind of rebrand its behaviors. So we have a transform to grow strategy, and a big focus of that has been around respect. And as part of respect, there's we have inclusion and diversity, and this has led a lot into end of year evaluations. So similar to before, the focus is less on the what you did and more the how you did it.
Yeah.
So people we can evaluate them on have they thought about inclusivity and valuing diversity. And also we have a behavior based around being open and honest. So the idea around open and honest discussions and sort of that contributing to good working relationships between colleagues. Other strategies that my company have kind of tried have involved around introducing unconscious bias training. And also we had an event early on in the year called the Human Library Organization. So this is where you invite members along, and these are people with all different experiences, and you can essentially just have a conversation with them and learn about their experiences. So that's that I personally found that very interesting. I guess a theme around these are voluntary events, and sometimes you attract people who want to go to those events, and you aren't necessarily targeting the people who haven't volunteered, and it's kind of how do you reach out to those. But there's been a definite drive this year to build on this initiative.
So it's really interesting because obviously the statistics coming through are worrying. Yes, and it's great to hear that you in your organizations, there's so much good things happening, but clearly they're not happening everywhere. So actually to promote these initiatives and make them well known to the external world, this is this is our mission now, within CITF, to promote initiatives like that, to make sure that people are aware how much can be actually done. Jerry, a question for you actually. Because when I was preparing for the session, despite of the Black Lives protests, and which has incited many businesses to assert their commitment to inclusion across all the categories, including race. Many organizations, racial inequality is still under discussed. Is that something that you put your agenda this year within SSC specifically? Jerry, I think you might be muted. There's always one.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I would agree with kind of all the comments that have gone before, and to perhaps touch on some of that.
Jerry, we can't hear you, I'm afraid. Or is it just me, or is it everyone?
No,
Breaking up.
Breaking up. Okay, so maybe waiting for Jerry to get slightly better connection in a second. We'll get back to you. What about Emma National Trust? I mean, National Trust is perceived by many as very white, middle-class organization. Yes, so racial inequality, is it now very much on the agenda as well?
Yeah, it is. I mean, all types of equality and diversity are on the agenda, and we're looking at it with both filters on. So we're looking at it in terms of the people who think we're a relevant organisation to be a member of and visit, as well as then thinking about our staff and volunteers. We've done some training this year around what's been referred to as everyday inclusion, and there's been a lot of training modules for managers, just generally around just raising awareness and helping people to understand, because I don't know about the rest of you, but one of the things I think is always an issue is that we all have our own lived experience. Unless you've experienced a certain kind of discrimination, you don't know what that looks like. You can't. And it's only by talking to other people and hearing the statistics and hearing their experiences that I think that comes to life. So we've been making a lot of material available to try and demonstrate that. And we've just been encouraging the conversations, really. I think the other thing we've been doing is trying to show the fact that actually we do have an increasingly diverse workforce, nowhere near where we'd want it to be, but it is getting better. And also the same in terms of people visiting. So we're just trying, it's that thing about role models and people you can identify with and trying to make that a bit more visible. And we've been doing more with networks internally as well, in terms of just really starting to get more networks active. So we've launched a BAME network, for example. We already had a very active LGBTQ plus network, but we've also now launched a carers network, and we're using our intranets to promote and share all of those sorts of things more widely, just to make those things visible and there. But for me personally, the thing that's been the most powerful in all of that is a couple of years ago at our leadership conference, we talked about what diversity and inclusion is really about, and we really challenged ourselves to say, we think we're a pretty inclusive organisation, but our stats don't match that. What does that look like day to day? And we did some work in some sessions at that conference where we talked about, there's micro inequities you get, those little things that people say and do that exclude people. And we did quite a lot of stuff around role playing, those sorts of things, just to get people thinking and talking. And what was so stark for me was just, you could see the reaction we all had. Everybody in the room was kind of going, we need to do better. We think we're doing quite well. We all think we really care about this. We're not doing enough. And I think that that's all kind of spilled out then in terms of just what's happening across the whole organisation. But yeah, definitely more to do, but it's very thoroughly on the agenda.
Okay, well, it's really interesting because one of the reasons why the racial inequalities under discuss is just nervousness and lack of the role models as well, actually. So that's something that clearly, we should start talking about, because that's contributing to a serious diversity problem. And that our undergraduate population is more than 50% BAME. It's a business critical issue in terms of talent pipeline. So,
but I think it's really interesting. I don't know whether the rest of you see this, but I just see the polarization that's going on in society generally. There's a difference in what you see in that, in terms of just sort of society, and you might see it more in social interactions versus what you might see in a workplace. And I think that there's always a risk that you get certain pockets in any organisation, in any workplace, of people who are of a certain type. We know that people recruit in their own image. We know that you end up with certain cultures and types of people and groups. in an organisation. And it might well be that you're not exposed to what the challenges really are. And then I think you see it so starkly when you look at what's happening in society. And what I can't quite get my head around is how those two marry together, and what do we do to change that? You know, because we're all people who have lives as well as work, but you know, we all tend to interact with people who are like us. And I think when you're in a workplace, you are more likely to end up coming across people who you might not choose to spend time with in a social setting. And that's the sort of thing that can challenge your thinking and make you consider more.
Yes.
That's gone away to an extent at the moment, because we're all in our little bubbles. Even in terms of the people we probably interact with day to day, you're probably not interacting with as such a wide variety of people, just because you're not around your offices or your sites seeing different people. And I just wonder what that might be doing. I don't know what the answer is, but it's just something that struck me. You know, I see the certain people all of the time. There's some people, I was in a meeting recently with somebody I hadn't spoken to for months and months and months, and you just have that moment of, God, yeah, I'm interacting with a very limited set of people day to day.
Right. Well, that's interesting that we're talking about, you know, groups of people who are excluded from communications. That leads us to another topic, furlough. Yes, how do we, you know, we talk about it, you know, how do we ensure that this feeling of isolation in terms of people who are on furlough is reduced and made not being a challenge for organizations, because let's remember, furlough was not a choice for employees. Yes, it was a new concept for the UK, although it was still quite popular across continental Europe. But in UK it was introduced in March. And we had all these questions, what is furlough? Everyone was asking. And obviously it was introduced with lots of teething problems, and some businesses still struggling with it. So I think we have Jerry back online. Jerry, what SSE is specifically doing about making sure that people who are on furlough don't feel isolated or undervalued by their organization?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can hear you now.
Maybe we can, maybe we can't.
Can you hear me now? I'm not on mute.
We can hear you, Jerry. Yes.
All right. I don't know what happened before. Sorry, it was a really bad internet connection.
You are disappearing.
Can you hear me now?
We can restrain.
All right. It's okay.
Jerry, what I would suggest, could you type in your answer into chat so we can see that, because I think we won't be able to hear it completely, but it will be really useful for us to know what SSE does to minimize, the challenges of furlough. Jamie, would you like to share with us what's happening within your organization? Do you have any people who are currently still on furlough?
So within the UK, I don't believe we put anyone on furlough. Because we have a global.
Sorry, Jamie, please continue, Jerry.
So within the wider organisation, so we have colleagues in America as well. I'm not sure whether they've been put on furlough. So
it wasn't a challenge for your organisation. No. That's very good.
I'll probably answer your question because I was answering it and right.
I mean, I think you just text Jerry to tell me that unfortunately we can't hear
you. Let's message him.
Yeah. Molly, what about the HR? Do you still have an IT and technology? Do you have people on furlough currently?
We do have a few, because we cover so many different industries. Some of our industries have been ridiculously busy and some have been very, very quiet. So manufacturing logistics was very quiet earlier this year. The airline industry is still quite quiet, and travel industry generally. So we still do have some resources that are out. And I think the way that our organisation has approached it is that people first approach. So I think the challenge has been we haven't had an edict, this is how to do it, because nobody's done this before. But where I've seen managers doing it really well, they've treated it almost as if it was like a maternity leave or a paternity leave. And that is a known quantity. We all know how that works. So, regular phone calls, regular contact points, making sure the person knows what's happening. So not just having a bit of a contact necessarily with one person saying, oh, you're okay, lovely, bye, but actually talking about what's happening in the business. So that when that person does come back from furlough, and most of our colleagues who were on furlough are now back, they don't come back in with no knowledge of what's happening. They come back in understanding what's been happening in the business, understanding what's been changing, if teammates have changed roles, if if people have taken on new challenges, if projects have gone live, whatever it might be, they come back into the business actually feeling part of it. And I think that's where I've seen it be particularly successful, is where those people come back in and still feel engaged. So although we've not been obviously allowed to have those people coming into the building, and well, none of us have been, but nobody's been able to be going into meetings or anything like that, because of course that would break furlough. Those contact points are still obviously encouraged. And like I say, I think by using that model of that maternity paternity, that is tried and tested. No one's saying it's perfect, but at least it's a known quantity and it's relatively standard. And I think, if we're going to keep going through, who knows, we might have another year that's very similar up and down, and the vaccine can't solve everything overnight. So it feels like we probably need to structure that a little bit more. And I think it'd be great to have some guidance from the government on how much those contact points we can do. Because at the moment, I think some managers feel quite nervous. If I pick up the phone and ring them, am I breaking the law? The ones that feel a bit more confident are just saying, I'm going to check on my person, I want to know they're okay. Yeah. But not everyone is that confident. And I think a few guidelines around it would really, really help. And then companies can build their policies around that. But it does feel like we know what that looks like. It doesn't feel like furlough should be as alien as we think it is. It may not be by choice, but apart from that, it's the same structure as we've seen before.
Right.
Yeah, that's so true. We've had the same sorts of conversations, Molly. We had a lot of people on furlough at some points, because obviously when our properties all closed, we furloughed as many people as we possibly could, because the organisation was losing money every day. We have very, very few people left on furlough now in IT, but we did have probably at one point about half the department. And we've done exactly as you described. We have treated it in that sort of maternity, paternity leave sort of way, where we've had keeping in touch calls, and we've had line managers keeping in touch with people, just checking in, from a kind of a well-being, how are you, we're still here, yeah, sorry, we don't need you back yet, just letting them know basics. And then what we have done is we've run a weekly session for anybody on furlough who can dial in, just to hear about what's going on. So not asking them to contribute anything, not asking them to do any work in terms of being part of the conversation, just so they know, yes, we're going to start reopening some properties, or this is what we're going to be doing about how we start to reopen our houses. So it just means that they're informed a bit about high level. So none of it's stuff that they have to do anything with. It's just for information, like you do with keeping in touch, just as you described, Molly. And then the other thing we've done a lot of is thinking about how we welcome people back from furlough. So we developed a lot of material, and we have a separate section on our intranet to help people to just reintegrate, in terms of these are things that are really important for you to know and understand about, because the organisation's changed. It's not the same organisation it was at the start of this situation, and we do have some individuals who've been on furlough for months and months, and that's a big deal. I think the thing that's harder is the personal impact it can have on people, and one of the things we've seen is some people, it's massively impacted their confidence, and I think just how we support them. So we've been trying to look at what else can we do to support managers, because the line managers have a big role to play, but actually we've been looking at how us as a senior team, we also help that, and keep in touch with people, so that we're doing everything we can to help them feel they're valued and help them to overcome those barriers around, because if you've been away from the workplace for 6 months, it's a big deal. And we know that's what happens to mums on maternity leave as well. Yeah. So I completely agree. It's putting that structure, but it has been hard, hasn't it? Because trying to figure out what we're actually allowed to do, and understanding what the government rules really all mean. We've had to clarify several times. We've just gone back to our HR people, and they've gone and double checked all sorts of things. But I think it's massively important.
It is, really, and obviously, with people who are furloughed, there's a huge amount of anxiety about financial situation of the company. Yeah, so, one of the things that are recommended is actually sharing information about financial situation to make people, kind of aware what is really happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this element of anxiety and uncertainty to certain degrees moderated by everyone. And I think that's probably important, not just to people on furlough, but in the times like that to everyone. Yes, to be open about the finance as well.
Yeah, we've done that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a conversation with a grad a few weeks ago, actually, a new grad into the business, really difficult position actually, joining a business at this time, especially when you're fresh from university, as this grad was. And we had a bit of a toing and froing, and just it's always when you're just signing off, isn't it? So is there anything else you want to ask? And she's just like, will I still have a job in a few months? Is it all okay? And I was able to reassure her, because I had actually been in a management meeting the day before, seen some lovely stats, and I was like, no, don't panic. As far as I'm aware, nobody's absolutely in the pink at the moment except for Amazon, because we're all ordering off Amazon. But but we do have a very wide portfolio, and I was able to talk to her about the way the business is structured and say, actually, I personally have a lot of confidence. But she sort of shared with me, she was like, well, I don't have any savings. I have my rent going out. I've got a car on lease that I've just got to support this new job, which obviously now I don't need a car for. I've got no savings. My family aren't nearby. And I thought, that is such a hard situation, and you don't necessarily think about that until somebody shares it with you. And I'm so grateful to her for sharing that with me, because I would have thought, as a fresh-faced early 20 person, what's she got to worry about? She's got no outgoings, she's got no concerns, but actually she's also got no safety net. And it was such a fear factor. And I think that's the thing that's been constant to me throughout this whole thing, is the more information we can share with people, the better. If you can share financial information, if you can share well-being information, if you can share what are we doing to make sure you're safe if you have to go into a site information. I went into a site for the first time on Monday since March. So it's the first time I've had a critical meeting that I really did have to physically be at. And I felt so comfortable that I knew all the safety precautions are in place before I even checked the details for that site. And I had the ability to check the details for that site specifically, but I also knew overarching, all the various rules that would be in place. I knew there'd be plenty of space in the room. I knew it would have been cleaned before we went in. I knew that, we wouldn't be shoved in there. There'd be lots and lots of space. We'd have sanitizer on the table, all these things. I knew that would just happen. I didn't have to worry about it. And that took away a big area of concern. Because I haven't been into a site in such a long period of time. It was an absolute challenge to get in a car and travel and go into a site. And that took away a lot of that concern. And I think the more we can share, the more that helps people. And that to me, that ties back to that whole inclusion and belonging thing. You're saying that person's important and you want to share information with them. And if you can, even better, share information that's relevant to that person, that's fab. But if you can't do that from a company level, at least you can share as much as possible. And then on a more local level, you can share appropriate to that person and appropriate to their situation.
I have one more question, because we're kind of going through the, almost to the end of the session. So if you would have one wish for 2021 for diversity and inclusion, what you would like to see as a positive change in 2021, what would that be? Shall we start with any volunteer who has something there already? I think, Molly, shall we start with you? Because I think you looked quite firm and you said, I know what I want.
I think for me, I want people to stop making assumptions. I want people to ask the question that you're a bit scared to ask. Don't assume that because somebody is of a different ethnicity to you, that they will have been born in another country. Don't assume that because someone has children, they don't have career aspirations. Ask them, talk to them, learn them as a person, and then you can treat them as a person rather than as an assumption.
Thank you very much. What about you, Jamie? Your wish for diversity and inclusion in 2021?
So I think this goes not only within the company, but also within kind of the UK in general. I think we just need to learn how to talk to each other more, be able to have conversations with people who we don't necessarily agree with, and just be a bit more courteous as well.
So true, isn't it? We've lost that ability to debate in a civilized way a lot. There's far too much of, no, you disagree with me, therefore you must be stupid, I'm not going to talk to you.
Yes, there's lots of tension between people at the moment, just generally, and we kind of seen it before in terms of tension. Kind of people retreat into their shells, and it would be nice to see again, more open conversations, and and also with the respect that I think Jamie mentioned before. What about you, Emma?
Mine is a hope of something I've seen that's been a positive this year that I hope carries on, and it's about it's about the humanity we've seen in other people. You know, the fact that we are all working in our homes and we've been seeing little insights into each other's lives, I feel like it's broken down barriers in a lot of ways. You know, so really, really senior people in an organisation don't feel as distant to some more junior people in teams. People are seeing each other much more as human beings, and I think that's really positive, because I think it's changing the tone of conversation. So I really hope that we see that carry on, and I think it's really important, because what I've found is it has given people that space. So, you know, Molly talking about her listening sessions, I think that I've seen that people have been more comfortable as well, because this change, it's slightly different when you're talking to an exec director and they're sitting in their dining room and then you see their husband pop in with a cup of tea for them. You know, that's got a very different feel to when you see them in a very formal work setting. So I really hope that carries on, because I think that could help. And it's interesting actually, because of all three of the things we've all said, they all tie together actually quite strongly as well.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I think, you know, I wish for, I think generally speaking, for, you know, I think, you know, empathy is such a crucial part of us as humans. Yes, and I think in the times like that, empathy and understanding become more important than ever. You know, just to understand, you know, how other people feel and what potential, you know, difficulties they have. As the graduate example, you know, we kind of think, oh, you know, we have our preconceived ideas, and it's good to be challenged on those when we talk to people and actually, you know, feel for them. So thank you so much for, you know, your contributions this year. I know that, you know, we lost Jerry, unfortunately, so
I'm going to have to jump off as well. I've got another call.
So, wishing you all the best, and I hope to see you in person.
Oh, I hope so. That would be so nice.
Looking forward. Thank you all for contributing. Thank you very much.
Lovely to see you all. Have a good Christmas if I don't see you
Thank you.
before.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.